I know my channel has mainly focused on historical teaching, and no one probably cares about my thoughts on the new Napoleon movie, but I love watching movies, and I was very excited for Ridley Scott's historical epic, and was deeply disappointed by what I saw. So, what the hell, might as well make a video, right? For starters, I'm not overly upset about the historical inaccuracies in this movie. And this video is not going to be me bitching about any and all little details that aren't correct. To me, a historical movie doesn't need to be 100% accurate to be a good movie. Movies are supposed to take some liberties to tell an interesting and entertaining story. If people want to learn about real history, they can read books or watch documentaries, or YouTube videos. Movies are about entertaining, less so than teaching. That being said, when doing a historical movie, you should at least try to keep the essence of the historical figure or event. That's what annoyed me most about the Napoleon movie. It didn't keep the essence of the character, and it wasn't entertaining. Ridley Scott decided to focus the main narrative around Napoleon and his first wife, Josephine. And that isn't bad in itself. It's good to show Napoleon more than just a military genius. However, the movie couldn't decide the dynamic between the two. Is Josephine the ultimate puppet master, secretly pulling the strings behind Napoleon? Or is she just a typical 19th century housewife, being abused by her dominant husband? In this movie, it changes from scene to scene. The movie focuses so hard on this relationship that the entire story of Napoleon becomes watered down, in my opinion. It goes so far as to portray Josephine cheating on Napoleon as the only reason he left his Egyptian campaign. The movie does the same thing for Napoleon's return from Elba. He came back to France because Alexander spent a night with Josephine. It's incredibly frustrating an iconic military leader is whittled down to such a two-dimensional character, focused almost entirely around Josephine. The movie strongly implies, without her, he's literally nothing. It would be like going to a movie about LeBron James, but instead of focusing on basketball, it's 3 hours of his wife is actually the reason why he dunks on people. However, even though the main focus is between Josephine and Napoleon, Ridley Scott does, in his own way, attempt to tell a historic timeline of the Napoleonic Wars. But it's janky as shit. Events just pop up with no context. The only reason you know what event is taking place is a text graphic tells you literally what it is. It kind of feels like if you just Googled the timeline of events in the Napoleonic Wars and read them one by one. The big issue with that is, I have no idea how a general audience is going to follow what's happening. I went with my girlfriend, and she's not exactly a history buff. She was confused as hell by all the events just popping up with no context. And really, I can't blame her. The only reason I knew what they were referring to is because I've read some books on the Napoleonic era. For example, it goes from Napoleon's divorce to the Treaty of Tilsit, with no lead up. I know what the Treaty of Tilsit is and how Napoleon defeated Russia in the Battle of Friedland before it, but most general audience members will be wildly confused on why Napoleon is meeting with Alexander out of nowhere. The Russian campaign is similar in that respect. After retreating from Russia, it just skips to Napoleon abdicating, skipping key battles of Leipzig and Dresden in 1814, which both could have been used to provide some interesting action sequences. But no, obviously couldn't fit that in, we needed more Josephine and Napoleon. I've heard people say this isn't really a Napoleon movie, it's a Josephine one. And that makes the most sense to me out of anything. It feels as though the Napoleonic Wars are just background to her main narrative. The events just kinda happen without build-up or weight. Like the Russian campaign, I never got the sense of scale of Napoleon organizing the largest army in human history. As well, Napoleon's rise and fall both happened kinda quickly. I never got the sense of Napoleon's ascent to power and the magnitude of it, or the decline crashing down all around him. Just didn't feel like a focus to this movie. Both the rise and the fall are quick so that we can get back to Napoleon's dynamic with Josephine, which I think was a huge miss. On to my more historic gripes about this movie. The essence of Napoleon is non-existent. He's made out to be this childish, horny brute. Most of the movie he's just throwing temper tantrums, or trying to bang Josephine. They do somewhat attempt to portray him as a military genius, but I feel like it falls way short of the mark. Most of the battle scenes are just one side charging at the other, big explosions, and cavalry charges. Nothing resembling strategy or Napoleon being in complete command of the situation. That's a good lead up for the battles in general. Battle scenes are why people go to a movie like this. And I'm not really going to go into crazy technical details about the battles or the formations being wrong, although the fact they'd never used column formations or mentioned them is kind of shitty. I just wish the battles had shown more of the essence of Napoleon as a military leader. The Battle of Austerlitz, Prussian and Russian troops just charged straight in. Then Napoleon mentions high ground, and that's pretty much it for strategy. Most of the battle is just focused on the whole frozen lake part, which if you've seen the trailer, you've seen the whole thing. If you knew nothing about Napoleon and went into this movie, you would have gained no knowledge on Napoleon being a military genius, or what kind of styles or innovations he brought. Napoleon's war of movement, or his corps system, which are still used by militaries today, that's how revolutionary he was, were not mentioned. and that's really sad. It'd be like having a movie about the Beatles and you only briefly mention their music. Instead, you just focus on Yoko. I'm really killing it with my analogies today, I know. Another historic gripe is that Napoleon's marshals are not involved in this movie in any meaningful way. The key to Napoleon's military success heavily relied on having good marshals who could operate independently of him. Instead, in this movie, they were reduced to one line of dialogue where Napoleon mentions how his marshals are why he lost. Without the elite marshals that he had, Napoleon never conquers Europe. As well, just from a storytelling perspective, it would have provided very good character conflicts between marshals like Davout, Ney, or Bernadotte with Napoleon. Ridley Scott wasted really good source material. In the end, the worst part about this movie is it's just boring. I can live with a movie that's not historically accurate. Like The Patriot, I fucking love that movie, and it is not accurate at all if you want to learn about the American Revolution. But it's entertaining as hell. At the beginning of the movie, I had good hope with the Battle of Toulon. I don't care about accuracy in that in the least. It was at least engaging and entertaining. After that, there were very few battle scenes, it felt like, and the ones that do appear feel very short. The longest is probably Waterloo, and that's at the very end. If this movie had been a glorified Michael Bay action movie, that would have been better than the slow, plotting, weird romance story it was. Let me wrap up this rant. To be fair, I know how hard it is to make a good historical movie. You have to balance accuracy with entertainment value. And no matter how accurate you are, historians will still complain. That's what they do. Especially telling a story like the Napoleonic Wars, which had a large number of major events spread across a 20-year period. It's hard to focus in on what should or shouldn't be mentioned. Like, in this movie, they never mention Spain and its effect on ending Napoleon's empire. But honestly, I really can't blame them too hard for that since Napoleon wasn't personally leading there. And in the end, you have to cut something or the movie would be 10 hours. Which brings me to another point. Telling the story of Napoleon fits better as a TV show, that way you can tell a more fleshed out story. A movie is just too short to get everything in without trying to jam too much in. If you're going to do a Napoleon movie though, at least center it around him as the military leader. By focusing so much on Josephine, I think they gave way too much screen time to one of the least interesting aspects of Napoleon's reign. It added an extra layer of disappointment that Joaquin Phoenix played the role kind of like a weird combo of the Joker and Commodus from Gladiator. Unfortunately, this movie I would rate probably a 4 out of 10. I wouldn't recommend paying money to see it, but once it's out on streaming, I would say if you're a history fan, just to have seen it, watch it. But if you're not a history fan, I'd pass. It's not really worth 3 hours of your time. Ultimately, this film struggles with direction. Is it a historic epic to showcase the rise of Napoleon? Is it an action movie to emphasize Napoleon's military genius? Is it a Josephine movie to shed light on her character in a historic context? Or is it meant to tear down Napoleon into a war-hungry brute? It's all of those and none of those. The story Ridley Scott tells varies from scene to scene. For me, it's sad because I wanted this movie to be good so bad. Or at least entertaining, since it feels like the movie industry has ignored historic epics in favor of making big-budget superhero movies. Unfortunately, I don't think this movie is going to help move the movie industry towards more historic storytelling. So I'm fucking stuck with more superhero movies.